Okay, welcome everyone to Implementing a Green Infrastructure Project featuring the Cosumnes Community Service District, Elk Grove Nature Park. My name's Haley Osser-Zelaya, and I'm the Communications Manager here at CivicWell, formerly the Local Government Commission. And today's event is part of our new webinar series highlighting CivicWell's collaborative projects. Each event brings together a representative from a local government or community agency, along with a staff member from CivicWell to walk through the ins and outs of the project and to try to inspire the types of projects that can be possible within your own communities. So as we launch these events, they're open to all. Eventually, they will be a benefit of CivicWell membership. CivicWell members also receive event discounts, legislative updates, resources, and information about funding opportunities, and encourage you to visit civicwell.org/membership to learn more and hopefully join our member network. If you have questions during the presentation, please go ahead and just place them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. CivicWell staff will be facilitating the Q&A at the end of the presentation. And please keep in mind, we can't address questions that are specific to one city, so try to keep your questions general in order to be inclusive for our full audience. Now, I'll take a minute and just introduce our speakers today. So Paul Mutin is the Chief of Planning, Design, and Construction at the Cosumnes Community Services District. Under Paul's direction, his team designs award-winning parks in the city of Elk Grove, providing the community with world-class parks and playgrounds. Jacqueline Moreno is the board president for the Cosumnes Community Services District. In this role, she led the fight for the creation of the district's first climate action plan, which leads the way in the region by focusing on sustainability and by encouraging smart planning to manage growth. Kevin Robert Perry, principal at Urban Rain Design, is a nationally recognized leader in integrating stormwater management with high-quality urban design. He has led the conceptual design and/or provided design support on over 90 green infrastructure projects within the U.S. Darren Suen, Vice Mayor of the City of Elk Grove, has served on the Elk Grove City Council since 2014. He represents the city on the Regional Transportation Planning Agency and serves on economic development, affordable housing, and legislative committees. With Darren's civil engineering background, he has worked in transportation, water resources, and land use planning. And Diana Vasconzalez is a projects associate with CivicWell's water and community design programs. Diana previously worked with nonprofit organizations in Los Angeles, mainly focusing on building more resilient local communities through the creation of community gardens. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Diana, and she will get things started.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much, Haley, for that wonderful introduction. As Haley mentioned, my name is Diana Vasconzalez, and today I'll be just sharing a little bit more information about the green infrastructure project that our team helped to implement at the Elk Grove Nature Park. I'll be specifically covering the funding and proposal that made the project possible, sharing a brief overview of the Elk Grove Nature Park project, as well as the challenges and the lessons learned. With all of that, let's just move to the next slide. Okay, well, let's talk about funding. Back in June 2018, the National Recreation and Park Association actually announced the availability of $2 million in grant funding to support green infrastructure projects, all of that through the Great Urban Parks campaign. This campaign specifically aimed to demonstrate the social and environmental benefits of these kind of projects by funding innovative stormwater infrastructure in parks. And the goal was for these kind of projects to improve the local environmental quality and also increase access to high quality park space that will then provide multiple benefits to community residents, and also create a community that was deeply engaged in green stormwater infrastructure solutions. CivicWell responded to the call of applications, and in November 2018, the proposal was awarded. our team envisioned an accelerator program that will then catalyze multiple small-scale green infrastructure projects. And the goal was to then guide 3 to 4 communities through the entire design, implementation, and maintenance process of projects that will advance green infrastructure and stormwater management within parks. With this comprehensive model that we were developing, we will then ensure greater community engagement and higher project success. For the site selection, we focus in areas that will achieve the NRPA grant priorities that I mentioned in the previous slide. Also, we look into the technical feasibility of these sites, as well as the opportunities they will offer to create multiple benefits for community members. CivicWell's role throughout the entire project was focused on project administration, support of outreach and engagement, and also the development of a case study that will not only promote, but also showcase the benefits this type of small-scale green infrastructure projects could bring to communities. And it's worth to mention that through outreach and engagement before the construction of this park, a lot of attention was brought to the role of nature-based solutions for stormwater management. Eventually, CivicWell partnered with the City of Morro Bay, the City of Woodland, and the Cosumnes Community Service District. And this last partnership brought us to the Elk Grove Nature Park. This site actually rose to our attention after it was deemed a priority for community involvement, equitable engagement, and green infrastructure opportunities. So in early 2020, CivicWell officially began working with Cosumnes Community Service District, and we then partnered with Urban Rain Design to develop a multi-phase nature park proposal for the 2.3-acre property located in Elk Grove. The general plan for this project was to use green infrastructure approaches such as a rain garden to manage stormwater runoff, provide wildlife habitat, promote environmental awareness through community education, and just contribute to the overall well-being of the community. The partnership between the Cosumnes Community Service District, CivicWell, and Urban Rain Design actually allow us to successfully build momentum around green infrastructure education and investment in this area. However, this project kicked off right before the COVID-19 pandemic. And the greatest challenge we faced at that time was the one to adjust our approach in response to all the unforeseen circumstances the pandemic was creating at that time. This, of course, required a lot of flexibility from the project team and even from the original scope of work. Luckily, the project team with the Cosumnes Community Service District was in the very beginning phases of engagement when the pandemic first hit, which really allowed us to pivot our efforts very quickly. We started thinking outside the box in terms of opportunities and also equity. We wanted to make sure that whatever the approach we choose to follow was going to be inclusive, was going to be accessible, and was going to be equitable for all of the community members in this area. Eventually, we decided that the best approach was to adjust and redesign the outreach and engagement plan to go fully virtual, which on its own brought a series of challenges. I'm sure that many of you remember that at that time, the platforms available were not that many, and they had a lot of gaps and limitations. Our team quickly started to analyze the options that were available, trying to identify the one that will work the best for the task we wanted to achieve. We went through a learning curve with all of these platforms, and we also not only test them from the facilitator point of view, but also through the participant point of view. We wanted to make sure that whatever online event we were designing, it will be easy for participants to join and to use the platform. We then decided guides and instructions on how to use the platform, and we made sure that we included this piece on every single virtual event we hosted. However, with technology, we were also able to remove some of the barriers we have seen in the past. Participants that have not been able to participate in this kind of projects because of constraints with the work schedule or family issues, or also even transportation challenges, Now we're able to access the information about this project. We were able to run a fully virtual outreach strategy that kept the community members engaged and involved, and also very informed about every phase of the project, and also allow them to share feedback. And even during this difficult time, the local community actually came together around promoting outdoor recreation and gathering, along with environmental education, all of that because of this project. Because of also all of the changes, the adjustment, and the learning curve that we had to go through, well, all that started to add up and create some minor delays in the projects. A way to overcome this challenge was to work really closely with the NRPA staff to communicate the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic was not only creating for the CivicWell team, but also for the local governments we have partnered for this grant. Eventually, we were able to amend our contract, and we were granted an extension to change the end date from September 2020 to October 2021. This actually ensured that all of the projects within this grant will have plenty of time to complete their implementation within the time frame. And the design portion of the Cosumnes Community Service District project was completed in 2020. And at that time, the implementation of the small construction project was estimated to be complete in early 2021. So by changing the end date, we were actually able to ensure all the project team had enough time to complete it. But despite of all the challenges we faced during this time, we have seen success in promoting small-scale, low-cost projects that create momentum to be built on. We saw this with the rain garden at the Elk Grove Nature Park. The district was actually able to receive additional funding from the SHINE program sponsored by the Sacramento Municipal Utilities District. And they also applied for funds from the California Department of Parks and Recreation for the final phases of the park. And because of all the support we were able to get from the NRPA staff, we had the opportunity to think outside the box in terms of green infrastructure projects. We were able to use very creative methods, not only for outreach and engagement, but also for the implementation of these projects. These projects on its own create an opportunity for our team to emphasize and promote green infrastructure in an innovative way, and also allow all of the team members to apply the knowledge that we gain through the whole design and planning process and put it towards the construction and implementation of the future phases of the nature park. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll pass the microphone to Paul Newton and Kevin Perry.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Diana, if you can please start to share the presentation, that'd be great. Okay, so as Diana mentioned, we were approached by CivicWell and Kevin Perry in early 2020, and they told us about this grant that they had received from the National Parks and Recreation Association for approximately $30,000, which would allow them to develop a concept plan for an urban park that featured green infrastructure. We can move next slide. And next slide. So Kevin had suggested that there was the 2.5 acre undeveloped area that was behind our administration building would be ideal for this purpose. Sitting in an older neighborhood surrounded by parking lots and paved surfaces, the site itself almost remained relatively untouched with remnant oak tree, grassland, savannas, and what looked like to be vernal pools. Next slide. Next. And next slide. You'll have to excuse me. I plan to be operating this, so Diana's operating it for the first time here. So we will, but we have a lot of slides and beautiful pictures to share. The site is co-located with the Jesse Baker School, the Elk Grove Adult Community Training Center, and Project RIDE, all of which that provide services to children and adults with disabilities. Next. Many of us in the planning and design team who work here at the administration building had often thought about this site as being a great opportunity for a more formalized nature area that could be shared with the greater community. In addition, the CSD had just recently got ownership of this site through a land swap with Sacramento County. Along with the site's low elevation relative to the surrounding neighborhood, the site's natural features, and the proximity of these specialized educational facilities, there seemed to be a really good nexus for pursuing this unique green infrastructure project. So that was even though the funding resources to deliver the full construction of such a project were not available at that time. However, the first step was to check in with our community. And sure enough, we had our first community outreach meeting scheduled for April 2020. And as Diana mentioned, the world kind of changed around then. And so our team, working with CivicWell, had to really sort of turn on a dime and come up with a way of continuing the process, because as Diana mentioned, there was a definite deadline confronting the project. So we were able to work, create, or using Facebook Live and Zoom, which were in the early days pretty challenging. And so we were able to do an virtual community outreach in May 2020. And we actually, it turned out to be very successful. We had 120 community members attend and watch the video of the presentation numerous times. We were able to receive really good online feedback. And with that, we're able to use the concept plan that Kevin developed through that process to help us vision what was possible. Next slide, and next. So we're going to just take a quick tour around the site. The area in red is the area that the CSD owns, and as you can see, it's surrounded by a lots of educational facilities. We have a high school, a Montessori project, the Jesse Baker School, as I mentioned, the Project RIDE, and the Elk Grove Adult Community Training. Next slide. As we zero in on the site, you can see the two areas identified as open space, surrounded by parking on one side. And then there is also a small park, formalized park called Jesse Baker Park. Next slide. And this is a view, an aerial that sort of shows what it looks like in midsummer. So it dries out quite considerably. This image here shows the surrounding paved surfaces. And as you can see, they surround this site entirely. And all of this storm water actually drains onto the site. Next slide. But that stormwater is untreated at the moment. These are relatively old parking lots that were put in way before we had the requirements now for bioswales and other methods of slowing the flow, if you like. So once again, you can see some of the images surrounding the site. Next slide. The other thing that was very notable about this site is really the lack of pedestrian access. We have all of these educational facilities surrounding this area with almost no access to the open space. And the only access was along Williamson Drive and in and around the Baker Park. So once again, you see these sort of vestiges of parking lot and informal pathways, but nothing formal. Even the park itself, even though it has an internal circulation system, It's not connected to the open space at all. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin Perry, who will share with us the concept plan and the elements of the tactical stormwater garden volunteer project that eventually led to the next phase of the project.
Great, thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everybody, on this beautiful fall day. We're going to talk a little bit about the concept plan, the vision that came forward. But first, to start off, just about the actual programming of the park site. So this is just a basic overview of what the park looked like, at least back in 2019-20. Next slide, please. And then looking at how we may slice and dice this area to best meet the functionality of and the vision of what the park wants to be. And just in real basic terms, moving from right to left with all the different education, community services along the perimeter of the site. This area 1 made sense to allow that area to continue as play areas, gardens. But then as you're moving again to the left, preserving the wetland area that's there, and in fact enhancing it and allowing people to experience this space rather than just looking into it. And then the third area of programming is a proposed nature center. This would take some time to ultimately develop, but it made sense to possibly have a local area for environmental education and other community-based events. And then the last piece of programming in the overall plan for the site is the parking lot, which Paul had showed you that it's old. It could use some refurbishment, especially in the era of green infrastructure and stormwater management. So looking at really an innovative transformation of that space into a green parking lot. So if you overlay just the circulation and the program that I just described, this just kind of graphically shows you how these different zones laid out within the programming. Next slide, please. Paul had mentioned this before, that the circulation was relatively limited to around just Baker Park. The blue is existing circulation paths. The red is nodes or entry points. Next slide, please. Major transformation within the concept plan. This allows people from the surrounding community, from the schools, to really invest and be in this site and experience it. So a really big transformation of how people are able to move to the site. And really, it's that in itself is a huge part of the overall concept plan. And then having so many great assets with the mature trees, allowing access points to be focalized where we want them to go and figure out where pathways would want to go based on where the tree locations are. Next slide. Paul mentioned the stormwater runoff that's along the perimeter moving into the site. It's about 150,000 square feet of that. And the plan addresses that by also having multiple rain gardens along the perimeter to capture and treat that water before it goes into the wetland itself. Next slide. And then this is just an overall view, a real simplistic view of the concept plan. It shows different gardens, different education opportunities based on how people are moving throughout the site. There's boardwalks. There's a nature center green for people to be able to just enjoy being out in the space. The proposed nature center, the green parking lot that transforms really 100% impervious area into a highly developed example of green infrastructure. Next slide. So that workshop that we had was, as Paul mentioned, was a great success. It was our first opportunity to introduce these ideas to the public, and just ask the question, well, what does this park want to look like, and get some feedback for them, what they would like to see. So we did have a couple of before and after sketches of what that would look like. It's the existing condition, again, showing how people aren't just looking at the wetland, they're about to experience this space and be able to move throughout the site. Next slide. And then providing some, at least in our first take, some imagery of what these different spaces might look like, whether it's the children's nature play area or different garden ideas, just showing some imagery so that they can take a look and say, yeah, that looks great. We would love to see something like that, or no, something else might be better. And so we went through, again, the play areas, different amenity ideas as well. Next slide. What would you like to see in the park? Movies in the park, places to passively relax, opportunities to sit. What's the materiality that we would like to see through the park? Different pathways and paving ideas. Go ahead. So it could be informal decomposed granite pathways or paver pathways, really angular applications of paving or boardwalks that allow people to move across the space. And then we'll also, if we have all this circulation, the ability to sit down comfortably as well is important. So different ideas of how seating might want to be manifested within the concept plan. Next slide. So it could be artful seat walls or timber seating, informal logs that are cut up and allow people to sit, or more formalized concrete seating. And then looking ahead into the future of what that nature center might want to look like. And the size and just the overall architecture, just get some ideas out there of what that could be and the different amenities associated with that potential building. Next slide. Even just fun things like information kiosks and signage, just ideas and how this space will take root. And I'm so excited to have Paul share some of these first phase imagery of what has happened since, but we'll save that to the end. Go ahead, next slide. And then that green parking lot, borrowing examples of how we can have, reduce the amount of impervious area, make it beautiful, make it green, make it functional too, allowing for a lot of ways for people to get to point A to point B as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so then we got everybody super excited about the nature park, which was great, but we also knew that this is going to take several years to come to fruition. We wanted to keep that momentum going, and then also provide the ability for people to be involved. And one way is through tactical green infrastructure. So many of you maybe haven't heard about this before, but this is a specialized design build method to quickly implement green infrastructure in a low cost but beautiful way. And there's 6 principles here of what tactical green infrastructure is. I'm not going to go through them and just flash it up there. But this has been built over a couple of years now, starting at UC Davis. Next slide, just to give you a flavor of what this is. This is a site at the UC Davis campus that utilizes tactical green infrastructure. This is the before picture, and this is the after picture on how community volunteers with low-cost methods and a strong passion to change spaces with only $3,300 were able to convert that space into a rain garden. We wanted to take that same energy and apply this and keep the momentum going for the Elk Grove Nature Park. So that dot that you see there, the red dot, is where we looked at a tactical green infrastructure project to start up. Next slide. So this is the space. It's about 900 square feet of what was existing lawn, and we wanted to convert that into a rain garden. There was already an existing low point there. It was a relatively simple design build retrofit by removing that lawn area, and everything's draining to it. The parking lot's draining to this space. The grass is draining to this space. Next slide, please. So when you're dealing with or starting tactical green infrastructure projects, there's no construction drawings per se. It's just a basic site plan and an understanding of the grading of the site to get approval and some funding for this project. So this was the site plan that we took forward, and it was ultimately, it looked good. And we started off with the tactical green infrastructure project, and then formalized it a little bit with the planting plan based on what was available at the time. So this is the planting plan for the tactical green infrastructure project, the rain garden there. Next slide. All right, so we're starting groundbreaking. So March 19th, 2021, we broke ground using UC Davis and CivicWell employees at the space. And we're just gonna quickly go through these real quick. Started removing turf grass. So we had CSD cut some of the grass up and we removed it by hand. I gave weekly reports as to what was happening. We spent the first week or so removing the grass, again, by hand. Next slide. And this, just real quickly, this wasn't like every day we were working on this. It was like a weekend here, a weekend there. And so the last day of grass removal was April 2nd. And then after that was done, we started excavating soil and grading the site. So this is some of our volunteers doing exactly that. And by April 30th, we had a good layer of contouring for the site. You can see in the background. Oh, can you go back just one, please? You can see in the background the drain that's there. So again, everything's kind of draining towards that, but we're going to slow that stormwater down before it gets there. So that's April 30th. Sorry, the next one now. May 8th was an important day because we scheduled a community rain garden planting day, which was fantastic. I forget how many people signed up, but it was Mother's Day weekend, and we had a lot of people come out and spend some time installing hundreds of plants within the rain garden. Extremely successful. And again, just building on the energy of the nature park and tangibly being able to see it come together. Next slide. Soon after the planting day, we had the mulch delivered. And so this is just with the mulch. It's essentially done. The project is done. And so just a couple of from May of last year, showing some progressional pictures. This is September of last year, and the plants are growing. Yeah, keep on going. This is July. It's an overhead shot of the space. And then I like this photo because this is Paul explaining to folks around the community that this is just the first step of the larger vision for the project. And so he's talking about the nature park and giving him an idea of what's to come. Keep going. And then just a couple of days ago, I had UC Davis students and myself go out and do a quick little maintenance cleanup. And so we're still invested in this space. And so this is the space in just a couple of days ago. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Paul. We're going to talk about the larger funding and phasing of the nature park.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. So now that we had completed this great community project and got a lot of interest around the community about our rain garden, and we're able to talk to folks about the bigger project, we were able to go and we had this great concept plan. But getting a project of this size funded, we knew it was going to be a challenge. I mean, we're looking at a $3 or $4 million project, plus with the nature center, probably a couple million more. So the only way we could really think about making it possible is to really break it up into phases. And, you know, even if those phases are somewhat arbitrary to begin the process, you've got to start somewhere. And so the first phase was to, well, you know, maybe we can introduce perimeter improvements. We know we need to improve the parking lot at some point. We can look at some of those concepts about nature gardens and even some natural play areas maybe. But maybe we focus on the accessibility and the pathway system and getting some stormwater gardens in there. Next slide, please. And then, you know, the next phase, we can add the wetland meadow component. We can start to think about what those boardwalks would look like, and those kind of brown areas in the middle of the drawing. They indicate possibilities for boardwalks across the existing wetland. Next slide. And then the final phase would, of course, include the nature center building. Next slide. So now that we had both a concept plan and an idea for what the phases could look like, we could set about looking for grant and funding opportunities beyond those grant or the funds or the grant opportunity that we'd already, you know, had the benefit from CivicWell's work. We could then go about looking at some of these other sources. And so we had also adopted a climate action plan. The board had adopted a climate action plan and policy. And one of the sustainability measures of that climate action plan was to preserve open space, minimize the consumption of natural resources, and create nature gardens. So preserving and formalizing this nature area definitely align, and using the principles of like low impact design and green infrastructure, really aligned with the goals of the climate action plan. And then when we were able to receive some Prop 68 Parks grant funding, a Shine grant from our local utility district, SMUD, and we're able to also leverage some Quimby and Lieu fees that were received from the kind of impact fee that came from local development to fully fund a first phase and put the project on the district's capital improvement plan. And so this really set in motion the next part of the project. And the district is fortunate enough to have a number of landscape architects on staff. And so we're immediately able to set about creating a set of construction documents that we could put out to bid. Next slide, please. We also had our environmental consultants prepare an environmental study, which was in the form of a mitigated negative declaration. And so our architects actually had to alter the layout plans to comply with the requirements of the MND to ensure that the existing vernal pools on the site were protected. In addition, they identified construction protocols to ensure that none of the protected species, such as the burrowing owls or migrating birds that nest on the site, would be harmed. And so we put the project out to bid in early 2022. And although the bids came in high due to some pandemic-related inflation costs, we were still able to award the project in early 2022. But the slide you see here actually shows sort of our first holdup, if you like, to the construction process. So before we started construction, we want to make sure that we're complying with all the conditions of the environmental report and being good stewards of the environment. And our biologists visited the site and found that there were, in fact, 3 nesting sites on the project of protected migratory birds. And so that meant that we had to delay construction. Next slide, please. And so you can see from this image that the locations that the birds were nesting in was right in the middle of our proposed pathway. So we delayed the construction until the nesting was completed. Next slide, please. So this sort of shows the area where the birds were nesting. And then finally in May of 2022, we were able to start construction. Next slide, please. And so these images just say, show, even when you're creating a nature park, there's a lot of construction activity. This project ended up coming in at about $500,000 just for these improvements. So the final improvements, which we're sharing with you here in this photograph, include paved areas that have informational signage that tell the story about the ecology of the site, green infrastructure, sustainable landscape. Also includes, as we mentioned, that accessibility was a really important part of this project. And so next slide, please. It includes a complete accessible pathway system, but not only that, it includes a boardwalk that traverses the wetland area while staying outside of the vernal pool zone to, allow folks that may not normally be able to get up and close to nature to get out there in the wetland and sort of experience the space. We're also able to include a number of stormwater retention areas that are planted with drought-tolerant native plants and habitat-enhancing plants. And of course, we have our opening day or our opening ceremony tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Got our sign up there, we're ready to go. And so now that we're, and here are some folks already using taking advantage of the accessibility of the new project. So now we're focused on developing a funding plan for the next phase. But in the meantime, we hope that the nature park will mitigate stormwater pollution, improve community health by increasing equitable access to green space and nature. And so thank you for listening to our presentation. With that, I'll hand it back to Haley.
Yeah, Darren or Jacqueline, either of you wanna say a few words?
I'll let Jacqueline go first since it's her board.
Absolutely. My name is Jacqueline Moreno, current president of the Cosumnes Community Services District. And we talked a little bit about who we are and where we're located, but tomorrow's opening represents our 102nd park in the Elk Grove community. So parks are something that the CSD does and does really well. And I'm proud to be a part of the organization. I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the policy level around this. And, you know, we're blessed to have a board and staff that are really big on innovation and making sure that we are working to take a close look at our current systems that we have in place and that are perpetuating kind of the climate challenges that we're having currently, and that are perpetuating real health disparities in our communities. And I'm really proud to be a part of a board that thinks along those lines. We decided in 2019 to start looking at the development of a climate action plan. We are a special district, and special districts are not required to have climate action plans in place by the state of California, but because we wanted to take a look at how we could be better stewards of the environment and take a look at sustainability and how we were building our current park structures and what we could do to be even better in this space, we wanted to explore that opportunity. And so we really took a close look at this climate action plan in terms of policy and used it to not only talk about reducing carbon and GHG emissions, but also looked at through the climate action plan, long-term operational efficiency, waste prevention, reduction of the consumption of natural resources, and then the minimization of potential adverse effects to the environment. So this CAP, when I think they were kind of happening simultaneously here. We were looking at the climate action plan, and then this project opportunity came, and I remember talking to Paul about it, and he just said this fits perfectly with the climate action plan that we are looking to implement. And so I think it just really was an easy decision for the board to support this project moving forward, because it really did go hand in hand with our vision in terms of climate action and sustainability. And then, yeah, like I said, it's our 102nd park, which is pretty amazing. We talked about some of the amenities of this park, but and we talked about some of the climate solutions that this park has in comparison to, I think, other traditional parks that we have here in Elk Grove. We know the urban heat effect is real, and the heat island effect and how that appears in our communities. And so this, project is really important for that capacity as well. So yeah, I think from a policy perspective, creating more projects that align with kind of a newer vision of climate and sustainability and how we are all going to deal with the real-time effects of climate change right here in our communities. This is an easy project to support, and like I said, it went hand in hand with our climate action plan. But I did want to just leave one little note. If anyone is here that is from a special district, a climate action plan is absolutely possible, and it's something that can be done, and we'd be happy to chat with you about what you can do in that capacity. It's a little bit different because we are not a city and we don't have the same requirements in regards to climate action plans, but we can, and I think we should, be innovative in creating climate solutions. So just a little side note there. But Darren, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. Thanks, Jacqueline. And thank you for your work on the board. Just want to also take the moment to thank CivicWell for putting this on. You've been promoting policies for and developments of resilient and sustainable communities for decades now. And so it's just really an honor to be a part of this forum today. The city and CSD have a great partnership, as Jacqueline and Paul talked to you about the parks and the things that they do and what it can do for climate change. We're really, I want to quote our Natural Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot. We have a new North Star and we're trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045. Efforts to remove and store carbon in our natural landscape are more important than ever. And so whether it's in the parks or these rain gardens, the more that we can implement on a local level, we just continue to create assets within our communities and for the environment as a whole. So I encourage you as well, like as Jacqueline said, if you're in a special district, there's no reason why you can't do a climate action plan. We at the city level, of course, had to do that for our general plan, and we're proud to. And it really was a fun time to be innovative. I mean, the things, actually, I want to go quickly to Haley. Do you have that picture of the rain garden, the city's rain garden? Can you put that up for a sec?
I'll get that right up.
Okay, thank you. As I was looking at the pictures that Paul was showing through the presentation, that's the preserve. I'll come to that in a second. But this was built in 2012. And so this at the time was, a proof of concept of sorts, trying to show what we can do from low impact development or nature-based solutions, as what we call it today, to see what we could do. This is about 1 acre, and to, see how things are evolving and what, the CSD is doing today. And Paul, credit to Paul as well. He was the project manager and lead on this as well. So way back to 2012, that's 10 years ago. And these were all newish type of things. And now, it's the norm, and we're expanding on that. Haley, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So this is just a snapshot of the preserve. I just, cropped this out from one of the brochures, so you don't see the whole thing, but this is 28 acres in natural preserve. It started with just trying to blend in our community center with in the surrounding community. And so the pond itself is about 4.3 acres, and the entire site is 28 acres. So you can't see the open space to the left there, and the trail it goes around. It's about 1.2 miles of trail, and having nesting sites for bats, burrowing owls, and other birds. And that's enough. You could take that down. Thanks, Haley. So the cool thing about both of those is that from a funding perspective, right, the rain garden that I showed you was storm drain impact fees from our drainage fee program that was done. That what you saw there with the preserve, our nature preserve, that was generated from our Melrose Community Facilities District of that area, was one of the named facilities in that district. But there's also many grant programs available to you now. There's never been a bigger investment federally, state, in combating climate change. And so, California alone has allocated $54 billion. The legislature and the governor has done that. The federal government, as you all know, the bipartisan infrastructure plan, is in there, or other grant programs like BRIC, I think. Do we have that up? Or there you go. Thank you. So FEMA BRIC programs, that's just part of one of 3 programs FEMA's issued, the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. And so I encourage you to go to grants.gov, just grants.gov for all the federal grants involved in it. You can query different things about what your needs are. There's also the state version, grants.ca.gov. And in there you can find things that will fit your community. So there's so many ways, the monies that we're talked about here. Now we've got so much that we can go after. So it's all about intention now. Really, you just have to want to do it in your community. And so I just encourage you all to do it. So that's it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we have a couple questions in the Q&A, and Deanna, you want to ask one of those?
Okay, I think you can all see me. Thank you, Haley. Yes, we have a little bit of time for Q&A, and we already received a couple of questions from our participants. Kevin, this first question is for you. One of our participants is asking if you can talk a little bit about how to overcome the non-financial challenges of tactical green infrastructure, especially on public-owned land.
Oh, there's financially is the largest obstacle. It's finding money for these smaller jobs. It seems like it's easier to find larger sums for bigger jobs, but I know you asked for the non-financial. I think from that perspective, it's just getting the right organization piece together to work on a project site. And part of the challenges is that there's so many different opportunities. There's just so many opportunities abound out there to utilize tactical green infrastructure. And it's hard to choose, which one to actually move forward with. And somewhat related to that is that you need a keen eye to figure out, okay, well, which project is going to be in fact low cost, is going to be simple to build, has community backing for it. So there needs to be some level of strong thinking to go into a project and knowing that this isn't going to open up a can of worms just from a smaller project. You have to be very laser focused as to what projects are really good examples for tactical green infrastructure. With that said, I've done close to a dozen of these now, and they're just, if you look at schools, streets, and parks, those three elements, there's tens of thousands of opportunities to do that. It's just, again, trying to get the organizational capacity to start to implement them. I don't know if I quite answered the question, but that was my best take.
Thank you, Kevin. We have another question. This one is for Darren. Darren, one of our participants is asking that how, as an elected official, do you encourage your colleagues to invest in more projects like this to support climate action plans?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I want to identify Jacqueline a little bit too. I mean, it's the same way she's an elected too. She convinced her board, about the merits of a climate action plan. And these projects, they sell themselves today. There was a time where you had to, try to convince people of the benefits of these things. There's so much proof now in these concepts, nature-based solutions. I feel that, at least from what I've seen, it's very easy to convince people in the concept. For me specifically, all my colleagues on the council were very supportive of the climate action plan, of the nature preserve. I mean, we spent the extra money to do the water feature and the pond. That was a significant amount of money. But we felt it was worthwhile. It was a community benefit. And so really often the question comes from is where to get the money, where to get the land. And now again, having all these opportunities to the grant programs, there's no excuse. I mean, there is a grant for nearly everybody out there if you want to do it. And so I just encourage, whether it's you or your staff, to go look at it, have a grant writer and look at it, because the money is available. The proof is out there in concepts, that whether it's our city or others. So, and we know that climate is the top issue for our state, our nation, our world. So I think today it's right. There shouldn't be much effort, but how you convince, the proof is out there.
Thank you, Darren. Jacqueline, would you like to add a little bit more about your experience, convincing your colleagues to go for these kind of projects?
I didn't have much convincing. My colleagues supported the climate action plan. It was pretty easy. I do think, though, that one way that I've seen other communities really work to get projects like this in place is to build community support for it, and to make sure that the community knows that this is a possibility. I think that's one thing CSD does really well as well. I think we saw 120 folks in the forum in regards to this project alone. So I think when you have community support for a project, it's a lot harder for board colleagues to disagree with an actual project. If the community's invested and involved and has put their time and energy in the creation of their vision for what they want to see as well. So I would just add that.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and thank you, Darren, for answering the question. We got another question from one of our participants, and I think this could be answered by either Kevin or Paul. The question is, aside from grant funds as part of the strategy, aside from grant funds, is part of the strategy to also raise funds from the local community, such as naming benches, etc.
I guess I'll start off if you like. Yeah, I mean, I would say in this situation, we were looking at, we were really focused on grant and leveraging larger amounts of money. I mean, the whole project came in at about, with the soft costs, somewhere around $600,000 to $700,000. So, getting individuals within the community, like, having a community event and fundraising, in my experience, is somewhat difficult because just the dollars that are involved. I think you're better off leveraging your community to get that support and then help you as an organization and the community go after the larger dollars through the grant process. So the other, I think, mentioned something about naming benches, and we do have that program. We did just complete a veterans memorial, for instance, garden where all those components, are built based on donations from the community. But again, you're going to get somewhere around $2,000 to $4,000 for a bench, and maybe you get 6 or 7 benches out there, and maybe there's a shade structure that you can get some money for too. But it all helps, but sometimes I think you sort of have to step back and try to look at the bigger picture to get things going. I know, Kevin, if you have any experience.
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Paul.
Great. Well, we are pretty much at time. I want to really thank all of our presenters for sharing all of this great information today. I think it's really helpful for those who attended, and those who weren't able to attend today. We'll be sending out the recording of the event, so you look out for that. Again, this is part of our new webinar series on CivicWell projects. So look out for our next one. Will be on starting a climate resilience district. So that'll be something that's very, very new based on the recent governor signing of SB 852. And so we're really looking forward to that. And then Deanna will be popping in the chat a link to a survey. If you could it's like just a couple questions. If you could fill it out, it just helps us to make these events better and more relevant to you. And then the last thing I'll do is I'm just going to share a slide that has the contact information for our presenters today in case anyone wants to reach out to them. But again, thank you so much for attending, and hope to see you with the next one. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Haley. Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.